Hey, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Untherapeutic. This is the beginning of the year, and a lot of things are happening right now. And one of those things is this interview that we have today with APA President Dr. Wendi Williams. We're going to be talking about an interesting topic, that I know all of us have experienced, and that is going to counseling. Why
Mm,
do some of us not go to counseling? What are some of the barriers? And so I'm excited to dive in. Obviously, as we kind of begin the new year, I know this is probably on many people's
mhm,
list of things to do. Like, hey, in
mhm,
the new year, I want to get back into counseling. I want to start counseling with therapy. Or even if it's not that, sometimes people just say, I just want to prioritize my mental health. And
mhm,
so I'm excited to dive into this topic. But first, Dr. Wendi Williams, kind of share a little bit about yourself and this new role and just kind of how
mhm.
you came to be in this space.
Mm. Nick, thank you so much for having me. I'm very glad to be on your podcast. Um, I am Dr. Wendi Williams, as you said, and I'm a counseling psychologist. So that's my formal training. I went to the counseling psychology program at Georgia State University in Atlanta. So really have those roots in the field of counseling focusing on intervention, prevention, and remediation. And I center that work because of what I observed for myself coming of age. I grew up in Southern California in the 1990s. I'm
Okay.
probably dating
Ooh.
myself. I know I have some years on me.
When you say
Um,
the 90s, that's
90s, yes, yes.
I mean,
And I'm
I
very
don't know
proud
if
of
you're,
my
I
age.
don't know if you're in LA, but I know Southern California in the 90s,
Yes, all
it
of
had
it.
a lot of issues.
I was in the suburbs right out of Los Angeles, and what happens sometimes is um, when kids are not from like the most popular place, they sometimes exaggerate some of the features of what they believe are the culture too. So we
Mhm.
had, I think, there are instances of like some of the young boys that I went to school with and young girls too who were trying to understand, for example, 1990s
Mhm.
Southern California gang life, right? And we've seen some of this portrayed in some films that came out at the time. I won't start listing them because you'll probably have like a list of who's of like, oh, I'm going to watch those over the
Yeah, I
uh
look, a few of them come to mind, so I already know,
which
like,
which one, tell me.
when you say, like, Southern California, and this wasn't necessarily gang life, but, first
Yeah.
first one that comes to mind is Boys in the Hood.
Yes, yes. Not gang life, but trying to stay out of those elements
Trying to stay out
in
of it, yeah,
the
and they did
environment.
it
Like
in
that
very
was what your
subtly
people,
too.
right, right, right. Like everything that the father, Lawrence Fishburne, was trying to do for
Mhm.
his son and Angela Bassett, the mom, remember them then? And, they were trying to keep their boys safe
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
what? From, some of those elements in the society. I always think of Menace to Society, Lorenz
Mhm.
Tate.
Yep.
But there's so many things, so that is a snapshot of the type of culture and environment that I was reared within. It was around. I loved it. I loved when. Oh, what year was that on the Super Bowl when they like showcased so much West Coast culture and during the
Mhm.
halftime show? We were just thrilled.
Yeah.
I was thrilled because it hadn't had that type of presence, but it also
Mhm.
had some elements um, relative to again the impact of the crack cocaine epidemic on our communities,
Mhm.
which very much is interrelated with gang culture too, and some of the things we witnessed with the economy occurring, which also then interplayed with and created some of the context for the culture, right? So I'm a firm believer and knower that
Mhm.
people aren't just sort of creating these manifestations of unhealth in their lives, but they are
Mhm.
responding. They are trying to survive, even thrive within contexts, which that might be really difficult, next to nearly impossible. And so sometimes the behaviors that we see come out of that are the maladjustment.
Mhm.
And also, you know, that might be explained through psychological theory and framing. And so that made me want to be a psychologist, actually, like watching some of
Absolutely.
the impacts of my community and how I could be of help. I wanted to understand it and I wanted to help respond to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's
Hmm.
amazing. It's amazing how our lives, in so many ways, contribute
Hmm.
to who we are.
Yeah.
And especially when we you take a path like counseling
Yeah.
psychology.
Yeah.
It's there's something that's pushing you in that direction. So,
Mhm.
today,
Mhm.
we're talking about, why won't you go to counseling? Okay.
Mm. Mm.
So
Mhm.
I think I think all of us to some extent have probably had this conversation with some
Oh,
lives,
yeah.
like you need to go to counseling. You need to talk to someone. Just kind of to set the tone. Tell me a little bit about from a percentage.
Oh,
What are some of the stats as it relates to specifically African Americans and
uh-huh.
going to counseling or therapy?
I have to be honest, I don't know that number. But
Yeah.
part of the challenge is that you don't know what's not happening, if that makes sense. So our
Mhm.
science is positivistic in that what I mean by that is that you can measure what you can see.
Mhm.
So how do you measure what's not happening? How do you measure the number of people who are not going? We could look at the total population of, say, African Americans in the US and then deduce that by the numbers of those who are participating in a counseling endeavor, that then there's this gap. But what we do know is that across um, most populations that there can be um, a difficulty in folks realizing the need for themselves and or members of their community and family to seek counseling
Mm.
or some mental health intervention.
Yeah.
There are so many reasons under the sun for why that does not happen. But
What do you think
I
are some of the most common reasons? That you see so
mhm,
many people, and not to lean on celebrities, but a lot of
mhm,
celebrities, a lot of people coming out and speaking positive about
yes.
counseling and the impact that it's had on them. Kind of
Mhm,
despite that, why are
mhm.
people still resistant to counseling?
Yeah, I think it's a number of I'm sorry, what did you say?
No, no, I'm just saying your opinion. What are your
Oh,
thoughts?
okay. Yeah, I thought I stepped on you, so I apologize for that. I think there are a number of factors. Um, we all know about the shame that people feel or can feel at times, or the embarrassment, maybe is another word for, or another way of thinking about this, for needing help.
Mm,
Um, there has been such stigma, and lots of our colleagues have done this research, in the last, 10, 20 years on mental health stigma. So we understand what are some of the reasons why folks don't want to go or why they are reluctant to go, whether it's that they believe that they should find mental health remedy within their spiritual community and through their pastor. And so they have, seen this sort of like either or
mm,
dynamic around that. We've addressed that. Many studies and interventions have helped folks to understand like there's actually a beautiful way that like your spirituality and your mental health and counseling intervention they can be supportive of one another.
mm,
We know that sometimes the problems or the challenges that folks are grappling with, they resent or are embarrassed that they're grappling with that issue. They wish that they were over it or that it wasn't something that was affecting them so seriously, except it is,
mhm,
And so, um, that can keep some of us, away from working with a therapist or, seeking out that help. Some people just don't know how to find this resource. And so I've been really excited over the last number of years. And I noted it occurred prior, maybe in the 2015, 16, 17. I remember Therapy for Black Girls came out and they had that directory. And then
mhm,
following that, many more directories, and particularly during the pandemic, I noticed that there were so many directories just to help people find a therapist that
mhm.
could be a good fit for them.
Yep.
And so, but prior to then, it had been actually quite difficult to like just find a therapist. When you try to do it through word of mouth, then it means that you have to tell someone you have the challenge. And so if you're having the shame and the
True.
stigma, then you're not going to say anything. So then it's the circularity
Or a
there.
friend,
So or a friend,
Yeah.
right? So now we have the resource of multiple directories for particular communities of affinity, and that's really wonderful because it removes the middle person through which, if someone's experiencing shame, is creating this blockage or barrier for them to seek help. But I would say probably more than anything, and especially now as we are looking at cuts and negative effects
Mhm,
on access to health care and access, particularly for folks who are low income or are using some of the
mhm,
health exchanges through the Affordable Care Act, that with that funding and those subsidies having been diminished, people are not going to be able to afford it.
yeah.
That I think is going to have a huge impact on mental health access as well as all health access.
Absolutely.
But I think that
Affordability is
what
always a big issue. I think
it
that's,
is, it is.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just going to be a barrier, when folks are like, am I going to get the medication for my diabetes or, seek counseling and I
mm,
don't have the subs, they have to make choices. And unfortunately, I do think that though celebrities and other folks have come out and have been like really positive about they have a therapist.
mhm,
I've been in conversations with folks, they'll say like hashtag therapy or,
mm,
sort of just
mhm.
acknowledging like destigmatizing, I go to that kind of thing. These other types of barriers are also very structural and they can mean the difference between getting the help you need and not.
Uh, with the therapy, not the therapy, I'm sorry, with the celebrities,
Hmm.
who come out and, talk about therapy, or let me just say anyone who has a major platform,
Yeah.
do you feel like are there any unintended consequences
Mm.
of such publicity?
Well, so you'll have to forgive me because I'm forgetting the name of the star, which is actually probably good, and the
Mhm,
person. There was a psychologist who did it. But I learned of something just most recently that there was some young man. Uh, I think he's a rapper entertainer, and he reached out through direct message. Do you know what I'm talking about?
mhm. I
You're
do.
naughty. Okay, he reached out to
Yeah, yeah,
direct
I know you talked about. Mhm.
with the psychologist, and then she sort of shared it with everybody, and then now there was this
Mhm.
big conversation around, is that ethical or not? And sometimes it's like, well, even if it's ethical or even though you can do it, like, should you do it? So
Mhm.
it's one of those kinds of things. But I think some of those unintended consequences for folks in the celebrity sphere is one, perhaps as we know with many of our clients that perhaps you share initially, but they're still human beings. They're still just people. And maybe they might regret having shared something so
Mhm.
personal.
Mhm.
And whether or not that can be weaponized or used in a negative way against them by either folks who know them or don't, or are fans or are not. And so just being mindful of like the boundaries around you sharing. I think though too, in terms of the general public, when we witness a celebrity being overly identified with what celebrities do or don't do, and
Mhm.
um, they may say that they're struggling or working with this issue or that issue. And while you may even have a similar diagnosis, the way you experience it in your world will be very different. So, um, you know, just to make sure to remember that your mental health journey is still your own, and what you need and what's accessible to you in your environment and what can support you will be very unique to you. So we can find connection, right? But we
Absolutely.
also know that even though we have those similarities, that my life is still mine, yours is still yours, and
Oh,
there will
yeah.
be
It's a
differences.
difference
Yeah.
if you're a multimillionaire, you got
Oh
access
my
to
gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. When your
that's
therapist says you need time off, you should go on a vacation. That looks very different than when you're
totally
just
different.
Joe Schmo. Yeah, it's different. So what's your equivalent? And don't socially compare online, which we know is
Mm,
another issue for folks that can actually have a negative effect on their mental health. And so on the one hand, feeling connection with that celebrity, but on the other hand, you're not able to navigate life and navigate your mental illness and support in the same ways that they will be able to. So make sure that you own your own journey and walk your path.
yeah, I think that's super important because again, without us realizing it, I do think there's
Yeah.
this subconscious comparison. And I mean, the level of
Mhm.
resources and that some people have at a certain level, it just doesn't
Mhm.
to me in my everyday walk. And again, it's not a good versus bad. It's just it is what it is.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Yeah.
We go back to the shame and the embarrassment piece. I
Mhm.
always struggle with this because we all are struggling with something. Like
Yes.
my issue may not be your issue, but I definitely have an issue and issues, right? And so, how,
Same. All of
yeah,
us, because that's the
all of us,
human
right? I
experience.
knew
Right.
you
Yes.
said, like me, my wife would tell you. She's like, "No, he
Yeah.
got some stuff he got some stuff he's working on." Uh, it's almost like how can we push that message
Yeah.
so it's not as taboo for me to have an issue because we know we all have
Mhm.
issues, but we operate
Mhm.
this issue is unique. Like how do we kind
Mhm.
of take away this shame and embarrassment sometimes
Yeah.
that comes about?
Yeah, I think, it's that's one of the blessings of the celebrities, actually,
Mhm.
right? Or just folks who maybe don't carry the 1 billion followers, but still are open about their mental health journey, the ways in which they've sought help when they decided and how they accessed it, and to be more open and about those experiences when they feel comfortable, because you never know whom in that room is listening and hearing you. So if you feel comfortable and confident and you feel proud and again confident in the decision that you made around seeking mental health support for mental health issues and challenges, by all means, talk about it, because normalizing it is what makes it easier, I think, and lowers the barrier or the threshold for folks to see themselves as not out of the ordinary when they're seeking help. And I think that that is what's really good from sort of a community health perspective, that as a community, when we normalize and regularize the fact that mental health treatment and support is as important to do as brushing your teeth, is as usual as buckling your seatbelt, is as, all the things that we just do well for ourselves is as important as an annual checkup, whatever the case is, and however you frame that we give it that type of framing,
Mhm.
so that, the shame can diminish or diminish enough so that one gets over the threshold to go get the help that they need if they can access it.
Do you think people sometimes overshare
Yes.
when it comes to just 'cause again, like, when they talk about, I mean, yeah, like, for starters, yes, I feel oversharing going on. I'm like, "Did I need to know all that?"
Yeah, yeah.
And again, it becomes tricky because on
Mhm.
one extreme, we celebrate the
Yes.
vulnerability,
Yes.
but then it's kinda like, "But did I really need to know that?"
And the social media has really lowered the threshold for us to sort of get a hold on that. Now, what I will say is that we're also noting that folks are actually divesting from social media in ways that I think are good.
Mhm.
Not sharing as much, not being as engaged, choosing other ways to spend time, valuing more IRL experiences. I feel cool because I know that, which means in real life. My nieces would laugh, but I
I
feel
do the
proud of that.
same. I wasn't
but
gonna say
uh,
nothing, but I picked it up, just to kind of
but yeah, I do think, it's the sharing the fact that you're going to therapy, probably not the worst thing to share. The sharing what you just talked about,
Mhm.
maybe, maybe not. And not because there's shame there, but what I always think about, Nick, is that you share and then you may regret that you shared. I know I've had that experience in the past. Maybe you have as well, where you've been really open and you're like, oh, should I have said all of like now
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel a little exposed to people who I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with what I said.
Mhm.
So how do I navigate and negotiate that?
Mhm.
And there are some people for whom it looks like an overshare to you, but they are perfectly fine.
Mhm.
And so it really is, I think, a matter of your own self-assessment of what you feel comfortable having out in the world and in the ether.
Mhm.
Unlike celebrities, we can control that. For folks who have the public eye on them, and that's something that in many ways they've wanted for their career, they do lose the luxury of privacy. We still have that, and it is an entitlement that we have, and something that we can enjoy, and we should. So I do think that folks overshare. I do think that that is very much a function of the ways social media and other media
Mhm.
dynamics have sort of entered our lives, and we can make different choices so that we feel safe after we've shared.
Absolutely. It's almost
Yeah,
like like there's a certain, expectation that people share these intimate details.
it
Like,
is.
we don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. You're not being open. And it's like, no, I am with people within my inner circle, but
Yes.
publicly, maybe not
Yes.
so much.
You see
You
that with
know,
celebrities. When the story comes out, people ask all sorts of questions that are really none of your business.
oh yeah, we can get so consumed with
Mhm. Mhm.
their
Mhm.
lives. It's kind of like, yeah, but
Mhm.
what's happening in your house? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
worry
yeah.
about them. For someone that is on the fence
Mhm. Mhm.
about, say, going to therapy, it's 2026, someone that's on the fence, what do you say to them? And then what do you say to the person that may be in a relationship with them that is trying to
Mhm.
encourage that
Mhm.
that step?
Mhm. Mhm. I can only say what I do, because I think that in the space of personal relationship, it really depends on what capital you have, what relational capital you have.
Mm.
Uh, so in my relationships, and especially because I'm a psychologist, and especially now, given my role, it's so large within the association, I'm very mindful of how even me making a recommendation might feel to somebody. They
Yeah.
might say, "Are you saying what are you saying is wrong with me, Wendy?" Like, and it's like I didn't say anything.
Okay, I'm
Um,
diagnosing you.
right, right. So typically, my approach is uh, to make the observation, to say, hey, it feels like you're going through a hard time or whatever, et cetera. And it could be helpful. It may be that the ways that you're able to talk about it, that it's still not enough. Like maybe you've
Mm.
talked about it with friends, maybe you've talked about it with family, and they feel like they can see you coming every time you're coming with that same issue, or that same question. And if you kind of are in that space where you may have saturated your network, that might be a time for you to think about some professional support,
Mhm.
someone who is skilled and clinically trained to help you move beyond where you are in that story now.
Yeah.
And what I then do, Nic, is always back away from it too, because
Mhm.
everybody needs to make their own choice. And I said, that's what I would recommend, but take it for what you want or whatnot. Like I'm always here to support you and I want to do what I can to be here for you. But I'm recognizing that it feels like it might be really hard for you right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
always give it back to them.
But I'll say this too,
Hmm.
I just see this in counseling.
Hmm.
Like I can do that for my cousin or
Hmm.
even a friend to some extent.
Yes.
When
Hmm.
it's a spouse and I'm
Oh
affected directly by the issues,
boy. Now you're
that
making it a harder question right now, aren't you?
you know what I mean? Like, hey, look, if it's a friend, I'm like, hey man, I love you. I did something I think, but I don't live with you though, bro. Like it's kind of your life. But if
Right.
it's someone that I'm like, if my wife or you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying, or
Yeah.
vice
Yeah.
versa, is having an
It's
issue that I'm
tough.
directly affected by, I'm not as able to extend as much grace and patience.
We'll see. Okay. Yeah, that is a harder. Okay, you're not
Add
letting me
another
off the
layer.
hook. I got it. You're like, all right, Dr. Wendy, we're just going to push you. No,
Yeah.
I think you're right about that. And part of what's different there is that you're in a relationship, in a close, intimate relationship with someone who is really struggling. Is that you are, and if you are identified as their person,
Mhm.
then you are called on to take an active role, whether or not you have the skill or capacity to hold and support that.
Mhm.
So that is much more challenging. I think in that, the other thing I'll say too, because of the intimate space of those relationships and perhaps how the mental health challenges of that individual will show up in the relationship, perhaps in times of conflict or difficulty, I'm also mindful that we want to make sure that the recommendation for you should
Mm.
get counseling isn't a weaponization of a mental health
Okay.
recommendation, right?
Good.
So like that, I'm like, you need help, you need to get some counseling. These kinds of things can make someone, it ratchets up the shame quotient that we
Mhm.
talked about, right? It's making them feel that you're someone who I'm close with, and just because I disagree with you, you mean I have to get counseling? This may actually push back and push them away from moving forward with that intervention. So I think that it's really important to think about the timing of the recommendation. I think
Mhm.
that particularly if it's showing up in a couple or more intimate family space, that
Yeah.
it may be one where we talk about, maybe we go to some couples therapy or family counseling.
Mhm.
I have seen good friends go to therapy with each other, because some of these friendship relationships are as strong and longer than some marital relationships, and some
That's true.
interdependencies there that, if that relationship were to have a fissure or a fracture, it's deeply harmful in terms of the attachment. So, getting relational counseling overall may say, I'm not blaming you and I'm not saying that it's only you, but I'm saying that this thing that is happening with you is affecting me,
Yeah.
and it's causing this other thing between you and I. And
Good.
perhaps then through that relational support and counseling through a relational lens can then help the two or three or whomever are
Mm.
joined identify where there may be need for more individualized support on specific issues for individuals versus what is for the group or the couple.
Oh, that makes total sense. Do you think we have a responsibility? So let's say you see a friend who is making a series of unwise decisions. Okay. And
Mhm.
this is tricky because, no one likes to be called on this stuff. You hate,
Mhm.
judge, and you think you're better than me. Do you feel like, as someone who cares,
Mhm.
do you feel like it's my place or responsibility to
Mhm.
suggest counseling? Or should I wait until you initiate some type of need for help?
Again, tricky. And I think it really depends on your relationship. Um, so we know some people in our lives are particularly vulnerable and they are self-conscious and insecure.
Mm,
And we love them.
mhm.
And
Despite everything.
so despite all of that and with all of that, that is a part of the love sandwich. I take you as you are, right?
Mm,
So, you know, I think that you really have to think about the relationship you have, and I call it relational capital. Do you have the capital? Do you have the leverage in this relationship to be the person that makes that recommendation? And
mm,
do you have enough in it in the relationship that even if they get really angry with you, that your relationship can withstand that anger, that frustration, that hurt, that reaction that they may have towards you for declaring a truth that they're not ready to hear?
mm. Let me ask you real quick, because I think you're spot on with the relationship capital.
Yeah.
How do we increase? This is almost ain't got nothing to do with nothing. But how do we increase? Because we're so busy. We go on trips, we go get
Hmm.
drinks, do
Yeah.
brunch,
Yeah.
and we're kind of quasi doing life together, but we still
Quasi.
may not have the relationship capital. How can we
Yeah.
be more intentional about increasing the relationship capital? So when I do
Yeah.
come to you and say, "Hey, man, you need to go
Hmm.
to counseling, bro," like straight up, like like whatever, however you frame it,
Hmm.
without them taking offense or misinterpreting what it is that you're saying.
It's been my experience, and this may very well have everything to do with me and the kind of person that I am. But
Mhm.
the relationships where there is deep pools of love and capital and connection that I can leverage, we've actually been through some stuff together.
Mm,
So we've even had conflict and worked it through, gone deeper because of it, know
mhm.
each other better because of it. It hasn't been all the surface level, but like I know you, and
Yeah.
I love you, and I know what it looks like to make you mad,
Mhm.
and I'm doing it anyway
Yeah.
because I love you like that.
Yeah.
And that's a different conversation. That's what I mean by that capital. I think that you build what they call it, the sweat equity. You built that emotional love, sweat equity and relationship by being real in them, by being authentic in them,
Mm,
by owning your stuff for sure, but also being present after the tension,
mhm.
grappling with it, um, calling people on the games that they play around power and now all the stuff, manipulation. And you're like, I see what you're doing. I'm not, all the things like going through it very,
I almost wonder too,
yeah,
because I talk to people and they
yeah,
they talk about these rifts that they've had with their friends, and sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, they were calling you on your stuff. You may
yeah,
not
yeah.
agree, you may not want to hear it, but how you labeled it wasn't what it is that they said. They say, "Hey, man, you got a nasty attitude. You show up like, oh no, they just don't." You see what I'm saying? And so it's like sometimes
Hmm. Hmm.
we push back on the
Hmm.
people
Yeah.
who we really need in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sometimes the pushback is initial,
Mm, true.
so I always think about giving a wider breath because I think that folks may need that. And what I know for myself and what I communicate to folks that if I love you enough to tell you the truth, is because I'm invested. Because there are other folks who you can seemingly do life with when you know very well that
Mhm.
beyond the circumstance of this particular situation, I'm not all that into it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm here and it's fun, but
Mhm.
you're a work friend or something like
Yeah,
that. Right. But then there are those people where it's like,
it's contract work.
and
I'll be gone.
yeah,
Seasonal. Be out of
where
here
you
by 10
say,
years.
can I tell you the truth?
Mm,
I won't say it if you don't want me to say it, but I have something that I have seen and that I'm witnessing as we're
mm,
doing this life thing together. And I care for you. And I feel like this knowing this from my perspective could be helpful to you. Maybe you do something with it, maybe you don't. Can I, like even to just ask permission for that,
Mm. Mhm.
because it signals, I do you trust me to say something that's hard, even, and can I trust you to hear me as I am rather than perhaps the story you make up about me because, oh, you don't want to receive what I'm saying. Oh, she's jealous, or oh, she's just this or that or whatever. Or Wendy told me something today and that was hard to hear, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. There's a
those are the
certain level of
places.
maturity that needs to exist because
Said, yes, and not every relationship can handle that maturity.
Mhm.
And
That's so
those are
good.
sometimes the reasons for the breaks.
Mhm. It,
Yeah.
it it is, and especially as we evolve, because
Yeah.
how I used to be, how we used to be, sometimes
Mhm.
can't exist in this new space that we're in, and
Oh
so
my gosh. Absolutely. I mean, we have some obvious markers. We've talked as we were getting started, like you and your wife had your baby and whatnot. Like I'm sure, like that, getting married is a marker.
it's a
Having a
big.
child is a it's a big one. Having a baby is a marker. Got a new boss in the house once you bring a baby
Mhm.
home from the hospital. I don't care
Oh
what
yeah.
anybody says. And so, but there are other markers that are not so obvious, and there are other ways that people may be comporting and analyzing and renegotiating their boundaries in their lives that aren't necessarily visible outwardly as well. And so, the ability to be with someone through their life changes is really critical. One of my dear friends that I grew up with, actually, we were talking, lives in your area. Um, we've known each other since she was 11 and I was 10 years old. We have a lot of years together. When I tell you we would fight like sisters, we love like sisters too,
Wow.
because we grew up together and we grew through seasons and moments, and we grew through moments of a little bit of like distance, not like anything bad happened, but like I was off doing that and she was off doing that. But we have that kind of relationship. I think that growing through seasons together helps you to realize whether or not there is a lifetime in that friendship, and
Mhm.
so, or in that relationship. And that is all relationships, because each
Yeah.
of us individually are in the midst of our own growth cycle. And so that is something that when you're in relationship with someone, you need to have room for, and need to know that it is something that you are observing, but it also is not yours. It is like, it
Mhm.
is yours, Nic, and it's mine,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's what it is. And so the maturity in relationship to hold that for each other and to hold something that's yours together
Mhm.
is rare, actually.
It is. It
And
is.
it's beautiful when you find it. So
It is. And I hope when someone hears this, they, don't look at the friend as a person who needs to mature relationally, but looks in the
at
mirror and
themselves.
sees
Yes.
opportunities for their own
Yes.
development.
Yes.
Because
That's
it's
right.
easy. We hear good things and we're like, oh, he needs to hear that, she needs to hear that.
Look at all those fingers pointing right back at you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I always try to I say to a colleague of mine, she has a radio show. I do a segment with her once a month. And we were just talking about like the inner work that makes it possible for us to be good community members.
Mhm.
First take care of home in your own mind, body, spirit. And, understanding that the relationships you have with people are gifts of opportunity to have reflection of you back to yourself.
Mhm. Yep.
So whatever you've seen in somebody else, just turn back in and
Yeah.
just have a
Good.
conversation with you. Uh,
I'm sure I'm thinking of some conversations I need to have with me. I'm
all
like,
right, right, right. We talk all day over here.
yeah,
Yes.
serious question. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. If there was, just kind of in closing, if there was
Yeah.
one piece of advice, as we go into this new year that you have for
Mm.
someone and who needs to go to therapy, who's considering going to therapy, who's supporting someone, like just if you could summarize just one piece of advice for them, what would it be?
I would say be gentle with yourself.
Mm,
You deserve care, and part of providing care for yourself is to let people help you.
mm. That's great.
And
Dr. Wendi Williams, where can people find you online if someone needs to connect with you?
yeah,
Really
yeah.
quick.
I can be found. I have a website, which is Dr. Wendi Williams, no punctuation, .com. So all the stuff I do is there. And sometimes I post things on Instagram and LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. We'll include the links to those in the bio.
Okay.
Make sure
Okay.
for anyone listening, make sure you subscribe to the Untherapeutic Podcast. Make sure you check out Dr. Wendi Williams' website and follow us online at Nic Hardy _. So that's NICHARDY _. That shows you how much I'm on Instagram. I need to be more. Is it Dr. Nick or is it just Nic Hardy? Anyway, it'll be on there too. So thank you guys so much for listening.